I don't know why, but I just found this Wobbuffet face to be hilarious. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 41 of the Journey's anime titled Operation Dub Pikachu Half Marshtomp just dropped, and this is a double feature episode. Part 1 is about Team Rocket, and Part 2 is with our heroes with a Marshtomp. How did the episodes go? Well, let's find out. So, let me say this off the bat about this episode. In my opinion, this episode won't translate well to the West. By the end of it, especially the first half, I was laughing, but during the middle, especially with the talks of how pronouns should be used and how one refers to themselves or others, I have a feeling that this episode works so much better in Japanese. I don't pretend to know a thing about Japanese, so I can't explain anything to you, but I do know that because Japanese is a language that has lots of words where meanings are the same and words can change with context, it's difficult to properly translate or sometimes even understand the joke of words unless you're really familiar with the language itself. So that's why, unlike a lot of people that had issues with this episode, I don't really mind the fact that the first half is especially dialogue heavy. This portion isn't meant for us. It's meant more for a core Japanese audience. And when you're watching a kid show, especially one that uses a foreign language, there can be cultural differences that cause us to like and dislike certain content and parts of the show. That's why I won't be as critical towards this episode, because I think it's one of those things that can happen every now and then, especially when you're watching a property with different languages and cultures. So with that being said, the first part of the episode is Team Rocket, and the premise of this episode really begins with Meowth being sick while Jessie and James are goofing around. After they get a blanket for him to lay down, he's about to sleep when he gets an epiphany. He realizes what Team Rocket is lacking. But before he can say that, he passes out from exhaustion, leaving both Jessie and James to scratch their head. Then, Wobbuffet pulls out a drone with a video Pikachu that it has had, and Jessie and James watch it to try to figure out what they could be lacking. And in order to do so, because Meowth is sick, they decide that they will learn to translate what Pikachu is saying, and they're going to practice it by dubbing over the videos from the drone. There's this whole back and forth between the two, which I think is brilliant interplay that really shows us their character. Because Jessie is vain and pompous, her dubbing of Pikachu is too. In her world, Pikachu calls Ash a dumb human and taunts him, but that's just because that's what she would do. But because they're also trying to figure out what Pikachu is saying, and James thinks she's way too pompous, he stops her. So then James tries his own version of dubbing over Pikachu, and actually, I thought it was actually pretty spot on. But again, this is where what I said about language comes in, because Jessie argues with James about pronouns and how you use words and how someone refers to themselves, etc, etc. And since I don't know Japanese, I can't really comment on this, so I'll just move on to what happens next. So Jessie and James finally come to an agreement to analyze Pikachu before dubbing it over, so they ask Wobbuffet to find a close-up shot of it. And in hilarious fashion, the first thing we see is a clip of them blasting off. But more than that, once they do get the clip, they see Pikachu smiling and saying Pikachu after making them blast off, and they become enamored with it. They see this look as pure and think Pikachu could just be saying, "See you later," or "I bid you farewell," or even "I love you," causing Jessie and James to bawl from this perceived niceness. Instead, what we see is Meowth, who's laying on the couch, say to himself that he can't tell them what Pikachu is actually saying, otherwise it would break their heart, which is a subtle way of saying that Pikachu probably said something the complete opposite of what they were thinking, which is fantastic. Part 2 of this episode is a lot more straightforward, yet the joke, I think, is still in language. Not for the whole episode, but just for the beginning. The premise of the second part is that there's a Marshtomp stuck in dry mud. But if you listen to what they're saying in Japanese, it's another pun, since the name of Marshtomp in Japanese and the way you say that it's stuck in the ground rhymes. Again, I don't know Japanese, so maybe I'm wrong in this, but if you get a chance to go back and listen to it. You'll see what I'm talking about. The remaining episode is our heroes trying to help it out. First, they get the Sobble to use water gun on the mud, but it can't. It gets too nervous. So they try to use water from a nearby waterfall, and they almost get the water there, but fail. Then, in comes Ludicolo. It's funny how much love Ludicolo has gotten ever since Detective Pikachu, and is the same here. Ash and Go initially try to get it to use Rain Dance, but it can't understand, so it summons the sun instead. I was gonna make a joke here about how that's not even possible, but Ludicolo is so great that it made it possible, but turns out Ludicolo can actually use Sunny Day through TM, so there's that. Anyways, eventually it does use Rain Dance, and the Marshtomp's able to get out of the Dried mod, leaving everyone with a happy ending. Until the next day when the rest of the Marshtomp are stuck there. So, while overall this episode wasn't as good as the first two-parter we got a while back, it's still pretty decent. While nothing happened in terms of overall plot, I think character-wise it's really good for Team Rocket. It showed off their personalities and their ways of thinking, and using Pikachu as a proxy for their thoughts was brilliant. And while I might not have understood the grammar things, I did still laugh at the episode, especially the ending of the first part there. The second part is fine. It's basically your standard Pokemon of the Day filler episode. In this case, it's Marshtomp and Ludicolo, small adventure takes place, and it ends on a gag. It's nothing special, but it's not bad either. I've noticed this, and this is the case even in Sun and Moon, that before big arcs, they like to do small filler episodes. I think this is mainly to give the animators a bit of a cushion to work on the episodes for the actual show, like the actual parters and the serious episodes, because they need to make sure those look good, which makes sense. And so this episode is the filler before our next major event. The next episode is the start of the darkest day. The first episode is called The Slumbering Weald. We can see it's gonna be dope, and I cannot wait. But anyways, that is it for my review of episode 41 of the Journeys anime. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, like, share, subscribe. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on this episode. You can follow me on Twitter at TheRealPDGaming, and that's it. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.